October the 7th marks 8 years since the US began its war in Afghanistan, while President Obama seems in two minds over whether to send extra troops requested by General McChrystal. Public support for the campaign is rapidly fading. Republicans are urging the president to dispatch more soldiers immediately, but Democrats are warning against any hasty decisions. Obama says he's searching for the middle ground, but has ruled out slashing the number of US troops in Afghanistan. With nearly 800 American servicemen lost, public support for the mission is at 40%, an all-time low. And while the US commander in Afghanistan is calling for more troops, some experts believe there are better alternatives. Well, we can now cross live to our Washington studio and Priya Sridhar, who's joined by Malu Innocent from the Cato Institute, who believes a troop surge is not the best policy. Now, Priya, why has popular support for a troop surge in Afghanistan disappeared?
That's right. Well, you know what, Bill? I've been following the story all week, and it's quite a complicated one. So on Monday, I went to a protest here in Washington, D.C., and the activists there were telling me that they want the troops to come home. But is it that easy, and how much of what they say will actually influence President Obama's decision? Well, joining me to help answer those questions is Malu Innocent from the Cato Institute. Malu, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So first of all, I know that you favor the troops coming back to the United States. Why do you think that's the best decision right now?
Well, I think what we've seen is an eventual broadening of the mission. Essentially, 8 years ago today, we saw U.S. forces in tandem with local Afghan leaders try and target the al-Qaeda leadership and the Taliban regime that sheltered them. But since that narrowly defined mission, I think we've seen sort of a gradual expansion of our objectives. Now we're being told that U.S. troops must protect the villages of Afghanistan from the Taliban. I think that overall we've sort of expanded our number of enemies. We've gone from targeting al-Qaeda to now targeting what is essentially a guerrilla jihadi group indigenous to this region. And I sort of fear that in the medium and long term that the United States will be sort of exacerbating the regional instability we see there.
And obviously you're not alone in the way you feel. You know, most Americans do want the troops to come back. What do you think has caused this kind of disillusionment with the war in Afghanistan? Do you think it's the high death tolls? Do you think it's the amount of time that we've been over there? Do you think it's kind of the way that we've redefined torture and the things that have gone on in Guantanamo Bay? What is causing this disillusionment?
In fact, I think that the disillusionment or the disenchantment that we see over Afghanistan is actually about Iraq. I think most of the American public has just grown to be fatigued by war, especially when you consider the current economic crisis that we're facing, the fact that, you know, levees are collapsing, bridges are collapsing, hospitals are closing. So domestically within the United States, I think many Americans are just sort of questioning, where is our money being spent? Looking down the road at the trillions of dollars that are needed to sort of extend this war in Iraq and Afghanistan, not even including long-term veterans care. We're looking at very sizable, digits for the deficit. And so I think many Americans just don't understand why it is that we're pouring billions of dollars into what is essentially a bottomless pit.
And so how much do you think this public disapproval is going to affect what President Obama decides? You know, recently his officials have expressed their commitment to the mission in Afghanistan, but they still haven't said either way whether they're going to send more troops over there. Do you think the public disapproval will influence his decision?
It's a very difficult question because I think that many Americans, even though they instinctively don't want to remain in Afghanistan, they really feel no cost to the continued occupation. They don't really see the tangible costs of prolonging the mission. So it's difficult to say. However, I think that when you look at President Obama himself, he is a political creature. He does face re-election in 2012, and he won't be able to sustain the casualties if this war eventually sees the immersion of U.S. troops within the Afghan population, which will, of course, see an increase in the number of U.S. casualties. So I think there's sort of a delicate balance that the Obama administration has to deal with. And I think, at least from yesterday, when he met with congressional leaders, it was apparent that the meeting was for a twofold purpose. And number one, to sort of get a broad cross-section of opinion on what to do in Afghanistan. It's a very complex situation, as you mentioned on the outset. But the second reason is because he wants to see how much pull he has with the Democratic base of his party. And I think that many within the Democratic administration and also within Congress, they're sort of willing to toe the line as long as possible. But I think that once we see things in Afghanistan eventually go south, even more so than we have seen in the past couple months, we might see congressional Democrats even further pull away from this.
So what would happen if President Obama did what you have proposed and bring all the troops home? What would the ramifications be for the people in Afghanistan and the Taliban?
I think that essentially what will happen afterwards, it might look similar to what it did after the Soviets pulled out in the late 1980s, early 1990s, sort of a eventual devolution of the insurgent groups, infighting, sort of civil war. But I don't think it'll look that much different from what we see today. A lot of the chaos and the catastrophe and the bloodshed that we see is with 100,000 U.S. and NATO troops there. So I don't think we can see eventually any sort of greater chaos than we do actually right now.
Well, I think a lot of people here in the United States are awaiting a decision from President Obama. But Bill, back to you for now.
Priya, thanks very much indeed. That's Priya Sridhar live in our Washington studio with a guest, Malu Innocent from the Cato Institute. Thank you.